this is the thing with plant medicine, whether it's weed, whether it's shrooms, what that does for you is it offers you a different way to think and experience. And you should bring that with you, even outside of using the substances. Let's talk a little bit about plant medicine and autism. I've made a video about this topic in the past of autism and psychedelics with someone called 𝗪cie. Some of you guys may know him as Autism on Acid, but I've actually since then privated the videos on all of my platforms upon his request. I don't know why he wanted me to private it, but you don't really need a reason why in order to respect someone's boundaries and requests, right? So I thought that, I should just make a video talking about my relationship with plant medicine because I didn't really go into much detail about it when I did my collaboration with Aaron because the episode was mostly built around him, his experiences, his knowledge. So I thought that, it might be nice for me to come on here and talk about my experiences because this isn't really something about myself that I talk about very often. And I've noticed that when I do talk about it here and there, you guys are always pleasantly surprised to hear about it. And as well, on top of it, when I did that video with Aaron, a lot of people found me through that video. So I know there's a lot of autistic folks out there who have some sort of hyper focus, special interest on psychedelics, or at the very least just have a personal affinity towards plant medicine. The things that I'll be talking about in today's video, just so I set your expectation ahead of time, is a little backstory of, who I am. I'm not going to go into it very much, but just how that pertains to why I started using plant medicine, because I'm sure a lot of you know when you partake in plant medicine, it's not just this fun thing. It's a very spiritual and personal experience. So I feel like giving a little bit of an explanation of who I am and how that interacts with plant medicine is important. And then I'm also going to talk about, how I use plant medicine and why I use plant medicine. God, I hate loud cars with such a passion. But yeah, with that being said, I'm not encouraging anyone to use psychedelics. I'm not saying this is an amazing thing. Everyone is different. Everyone is on their own journey. Everyone will or won't use psychedelics. And it's okay. Everyone is free to have their own preferences, their own stories, and their own journeys in life, right? Just because I've had this experience doesn't mean I'm saying everyone else should and have the same beliefs as me. It's just, I'm simply sharing my experience, and whoever's interested will stimulate their mind for a few minutes listening to my story, and then we all move on with our lives. I actually went my whole life pretty straight edge. So straight edge means that you don't really do anything when it comes to substances. On one hand, I'm very, very intolerant to alcohol, so I could never drink even if I wanted to. I know a lot of Asian folks will get Asian glow, if you've heard of it. It's when your skin turns red. I have something worse than that. The very few times in my life where I've drank, I will break out in hives, I will swell, my eyes will turn red, and I just get really, really sick and I'll start throwing up, even when I'm not drunk. So it's not a good deal. I get super sick. It's not even worth it. I can't even have fun because I'm just throwing up all night. And that's from taking 2 shots, So I've never been able to get into alcohol, even if I wanted to, which was just so present throughout my adolescence. I feel like growing up in the suburbs, everyone was partying, everyone was using something, even outside of alcohol, everyone was using hard drugs in a sense, like party drugs and whatnot. And I think on top of being neurodivergent and introverted, I just didn't put myself in situations to use substances, because if I did and I wasn't using substances, I would feel even weirder and even more black sheep, if that makes sense. But on top of that, because my life as a kid and as a teenager was so tumultuous, my home life was just not safe at all, safe in any sort of capacity. And I was also very much so a parentified child in many ways. I was that kid that had to listen to her parents yell at each other and then try to insert myself to get them to stop fighting and to say, hey, this is what dad's trying to say. Do you understand? This is what mom's trying to say. Can you listen? Can you guys stop fighting? Can you guys stop yelling at each other? Do you guys even love each other? Should you guys even be together? Maybe you should consider getting a divorce. These are all things that I had to deal with and confront on a day-to-day basis as a 15, 16-year-old. So as you can imagine, when you live the most formative years of your life, not having any sense of safety, not having anyone to come home to and lean on when you're having a bad day, not having anyone to go to when you didn't know what was happening and they could give you advice. And if anything, the script was flipped in a way where I had to check in with my parents and make sure they're okay, you know? On nights where my mom wasn't doing well emotionally, she would come sleep in my bed and to get some comfort. And, you know, these are not normal things for a teenager to go through. And this profoundly impacted me as a person because I just never felt safe to let go, in a sense, which ties into substances, because the whole point of substances is you almost like lose touch of your body and your perception of reality and how you experience it to an extent, right? Like, of course, there's different levels of being under the influence, but for me, for the longest time, any form of my experience being altered in any way was extremely scary and triggering for me, because on such a primal level, I just could not ever feel safe enough to let go and just have fun and just experience things, right? And so I went through so much of my life not using substances because on one hand, I didn't trust people or the environment enough to not be in full control of my body, right? And I'm sure a lot of you who may have dealt with domestic violence in any sort of capacity, you can understand that very visceral fear of not being in control of what's happening to your body. And so I was dealing with that. On the other hand, I was also dealing with the very real fear of, if I were to know what it felt like to be under the influence, I didn't trust myself enough to handle that. And I didn't trust the people in my life enough to take care of me if I were to ever get addicted and not be able to handle my relationship with substance use. Does that make sense? Which, as you can see, is not normal for a kid to think. Like, for me to sit there and go through the practical steps of, if I were to get into this, what if I really like it? What if it's the first time I felt good in all these years, and when I'm having a bad day and I'm coming home and my parents are arguing, I want to just escape, and then I start using substances and it very quickly starts to spiral downward. I looked around me and I saw everyone my age using substances at parties, and it was recreational and it was fun, but I had enough self-awareness to know I wasn't like them. I had very real shit I was dealing with at home. I had very real shit that I had to deal with myself, and I didn't have help with that. And so I knew that if I were to like the substances, I wouldn't be able to handle it, because I went my whole life basically being an undiagnosed and untreated, unsupported neurodivergent person, right? And that's fucking difficult when you feel like you're trying so hard and you're still not really doing life at the capacity everyone else is doing. And so I just didn't feel very stable or good about myself in any sort of way. I felt like substances would just make it worse, because at the end of the day, if you're struggling to that capacity, you're gonna wanna escape at some point. When you don't really have things in your life making you feel comfortable, safe, good, I saw myself very likely turning to substances as a means to escape and numb myself, rather than using it like everyone else was in a very easygoing, you don't even have to think about it way. I just felt like I couldn't afford to be that ignorant. I wish I was able to afford that, but I just couldn't. And I feel like that's not something a lot of people really talk about, or I don't see a lot of people talk about that. You know, being able to have that much self-awareness of like, I would love to experiment with this, but I don't trust myself enough because I'm not in a stable enough place in my life or my mental health to know what it's like to alter your state of mind and to be able to handle that with responsibility. Does that make sense? The very first time I've ever used anything was weed, because I'm from the Bay Area. We love weed here, okay? So I'm from the Bay, and I was at a house party with my coworkers at the time. The house party was kind of split into two groups of people. There were the drunk, extroverted people that were screaming and dancing to music. And then in the other room was the stoners. Guess where I found myself being drawn to, you guys? Surprise, surprise, it was the stoner room. So I made my way to the stoner room because it was quiet and they were all just chilling on the couch and they were just like playing guitar, vibing, talking, singing. It was super chill and I was just hanging out with them. And then they were like, okay, let's go take a smoke break. And they went outside and I went with them and we all stood in a circle and they were passing the joint around. And I was like, I've never smoked weed before. I've never partaken in any marijuana before. And then they all were just like, uh-oh, Irene, we're gonna influence you. Uh-oh. They were being sarcastic, you guys. Of course, they're not peer pressuring me at all. It was just one of those things where they're like laughing about how once I felt what it was like to be high. You know what I'm saying? After they kind of joked, they were like, but seriously, if you don't want to, no pressure. We're just going to skip you in the circle and whatnot. I've always told myself that if I ever wanted to get into anything, it would have to be natural and I would have to be in a good place in my life. And I would have had to been in a good place in my life for a while. So I could trust myself to have a good relationship with substances. You know what I'm saying? And at the time, I was probably around 23 or 24. I was outside of college. I had already had many years away from that very violent and tumultuous home life. And I've had many years to basically slowly build myself up and feel stable, feel comfortable in my body and in my home environment. Just to give you guys some perspective, it took me years of living away from my abusers to get to a point where I was comfortable just hanging out in the living room instead of locking myself in the room. You know what I'm saying? There's just a very specific baseline of safety and stability that I wanted to experience on a day-to-day level before I felt comfortable enough to feel what it felt like to be under the influence of something. And even then, I knew that when I would get into something, it would be weed first, because weed it's just very mellow in a sense. And I felt like that suited my personality because I'm a very mellow, chill person. And so I just felt drawn to weed, but I was waiting to get myself to a point where I felt like I could responsibly handle it. But all of that to say, I was like, you know what? I'm going to give it a try. I smoked it. And I remember immediately feeling relaxed. And I remember being like, what the fuck? I remember thinking to myself, is this what it feels like to not be white knuckling your way through life? Is this what it feels like to actually be relaxed? And it was honestly crazy for me to experience that for the first time, because I had been experiencing such a high level of stress and overstimulation that went unacknowledged and unattended to for so much of my life. So experiencing the actual effects of my body relaxing was honestly insane for me, because at that point, I went through years of therapy. I worked on myself for so long that I could tell myself all the right things to relax myself and to stop overthinking things, but I would still feel that disconnect of my mind being calm, but my body feeling like it was about to be chased by a lion. And so when I smoked weed for the first time, I finally felt what it was like to have my body match my mind, where I was chill in my head and my body now felt like it could exhale. Finally exhale is what it feels like. That's what I love about weed, is that it, for me at least, I know it impacts everyone in different ways, but for me at least, when I'm high, I feel like my body can finally exhale. it's almost like the tension built up in my muscles and in my neck releases, and I could just let go of the day. And it's so helpful when you're autistic and you're constantly overstimulated on a day-to-day basis. You really don't realize how overstimulated you are until you take weed or you do something that physically relaxes your body, because you don't need weed for that, right? Sometimes people exercise in order to feel that way or do breath work. But for me, weed was the very first time that I was able to just have that full body exhale sensation, and it changed my life. And ever since that first time of smoking weed, I didn't really get into it because I had so much self-control over my choices and things like that. But I feel like given the environments I was in and being in the Bay Area, you know, everyone and their moms and dads and uncles are smoking. Here in the Bay, when you go to the dispensary, you see tech people, you see moms and dads, grandparents, like everyone uses weed. People of all ethnicities are using weed. It's so normalized here because people don't see it as like, oh my God, it's a drug. It's gonna fry your brain. I feel like for the most part, the people that I see in the dispensaries and using weed are using it in a very healthy way where it's not something they need, but it's something that they could use for a specific reason to relax, to enjoy their meal a little bit better, you know, whatever it is. It's not stigmatized. And I feel like I'm very appreciative of growing up in an area that doesn't have stigmatization towards weed in that sense, because it allowed me to develop a healthy relationship with weed as well, where it's not like I'm hiding weed and I'm using it in the dark corners of my house and being like, I hope no one sees me. It's like the years after that very first time, I would, let's say, go to jiu-jitsu, and after hours of rolling with the guys, we would just be drenched in sweat, smoking weed, and then go to In-N-Out and eat a burger and then go home. Sometimes the jiu-jitsu guys will roll up. I'm talking purple brown belts. They'll roll up high. Their gi smells like weed, and they're just having fun in class and rolling high. And this is a dad or an uncle, and they're responsible. They have a job. You know what I'm saying? So I feel very thankful because I feel like being around people like that helped not necessarily teach me how to have a healthy relationship with weed, because I definitely feel like I would have had that relationship with weed regardless of the environment I'm in, which is very autistic of me. It's just I don't follow social norms. It's like if I was in a very conservative area that demonized weed, I would still have that relationship with weed. It's just it would have been a lot harder to do. But because I grew up in an environment that wasn't stigmatizing weed and everyone had a healthy relationship with it, I felt like it was just a nice supplement to what I was already doing. And then if anything, I felt a sense of community around it, because smoking together or just being high together is, I don't know, it's just very bonding. It helps relax you. It helps bring down some of those walls. It helps take that edge off and make you feel less anxious. And I don't know, it's just, I like it. And this isn't to say that people can't have unhealthy relationship with weed. Like anything, you could get addicted. You could get addicted to coffee. You could get addicted to shopping. As you can see, when the people around you and you yourself aren't really approaching your relationship with weed with a lot of shame, and there's a lot of openness and healthiness, it fosters a safe environment, a safe relationship with weed. And ever since then, I kind of used it at first as a way to help me relax. So if I had a day off work, for example, and I just wanted to enjoy myself a little bit more, I would smoke some weed, listen to some music, and just relax. I would also use it recreationally, not in a way to go party, but to just like bond with other people, because I do best when I'm one-on-one with someone. But lately, the way that I've been using weed is more so just a routine, if that makes sense. So this is an idea that I actually got from someone in my life that's also autistic, and he is very, very smart and very organized and has his whole life together. So I kind of look up to him in that sense. But I noticed that he likes to use weed at night, almost like a melatonin pill in a sense to help get you tired. He'll take, you know, a little bit of an edible just to like drop into your body a little bit more, and that's it. And I thought that was so interesting when I saw him do that. And I was like, you know what? I want to give that a try, because there's days where I feel like I can't get myself to step away from work. I have a hard time transitioning. And so being able to, after work, take, let's say, 5 milligrams of an edible. By the way, I'm an indica girl. So there's sativas, hybrids, indica. I am full-blown indica, nothing else. I want to be in my body. Sativa gets me in my head, and that is the last thing I need because I'm already there. That's the thing, is I use weed to get all the energy from here and drop it down to my body. And so after work, I'm going insane in my head already, because that's what it takes to get work done, right? I take 5 milligrams of indica edibles before I could even think about it. I'm out the door on my daily walk, and usually within 15 to 30 minutes, the edible kicks in and I'll feel this literal exhale in my body, and all that buzzing, it starts to like simmer down and drip into my body. It almost feels like an even dispersion of your energy in your whole body, if that makes sense. And so it almost soaks you into the environment and the sensory experiences. It makes you feel a lot more sensual. So, you know, being able to feel the wind on my skin and be like, oh, that feels so good. Or like, what weed also helps me with is being able to eat more regularly. So a part of my neurodivergence, my autism, is when I get really, really focused on something, I can't think of anything else. I can't think of eating. I can't think of drinking. Like, I literally don't feel hungry. And even if I am starving, like I'm really hungry and my stomach's growling, mentally, I just can't fathom eating food. Weed really, really does help ignite my hunger again, because it helps me get back in tune with my body, and it helps turn on those signals again of like, ooh, I'm hungry. Ooh, I'm craving this. Oh my God, I really want to go eat that. You know what I'm saying? And so I feel like weed really does help counteract a lot of the things that disconnects me from my body, and it kind of brings me back down into it and drop into my body again, which has only helped improve my quality of life, to be honest. So at this point in my life, and this has been my reality for the past 2 years or so, the way that I use weed is almost like my own personal way to drop into myself. It's a routine thing. I don't get high to go socialize. I don't go get high to go do things, you know? Weed is a way for me to connect to myself and enjoy my life through my senses again, and just feel like that world and that experience is a lot richer. Because I'm sure those of you who have been high before know, when you are high and you're eating, oh my God, it's like you're eating for the first time, to be honest. Like, you know how when kids are just sitting there and they're chewing on food and they're just like super lost in a daze? That's what it feels like every time when you're eating, when you're high. It's good. I never get too high where I can't think or do things. And I've gotten feedback from a lot of people in my life that they can't even tell when I'm high. I think because I'm already so chill and understated, that when I'm on something, that doesn't really alter my state. And I think another part of it is your relationship with your own consciousness, right? Like, a lot of people who don't feel a sense of peace within themselves, or they feel a lot of shame when they're under the influence, their drunk self or their high self or whatever is going to be completely different than what you see normally. But because I've spent my whole life trying to synthesize myself with my own subconscious and my unconscious and get right with it and accept it and do all that shadow work, and I did it all sober, right? Once I started partaking in substances in any capacity, this includes weed, this includes shrooms, it doesn't matter how much under the influence I am at peace with myself, and I will not have bad trips. I won't have anxious, paranoid thoughts, if that makes sense, which is good. This is why I spent all those years not partaking in substances, because if I had started getting high on weed when I was a teenager or in my early 20s, I would be that person that would have paranoid thoughts and all that kind of stuff. But because I found a sense of peace and I accepted myself and then started using and integrating plant medicine into my life, it's like I'm just the same person. It's just the way that I'm experiencing things through my body is different. Does that make sense? And so this is just interesting for me to think about, because with all of the friends that I've had in my life that have seen me high, they're always talking about, oh my God, Irene, how are you not paranoid right now? Or, oh my gosh, like, how are you so chill right now? I always get these really anxious thoughts, or like I get really paranoid when I'm on weed, and I'm just like, why? And I mean, it makes sense, because when I actually think about it, these friends of mine have a lot of like work to do inside. And this isn't to say they're bad people, but it's just like they don't feel at peace inside. There's a war going on in them. They don't accept themselves. They have a lot of negative beliefs of themselves. And so obviously when you're not in full control over your altered state, that feeling of not being good enough is going to start to infect your thought patterns a little bit more intensely and things like that. But yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. Make sure you're right with yourself before you partake in any substances, because it does make a huge difference. So moving on to shrooms and psychedelics. This is something that I didn't do until way later, even after I started getting into weed, because I wanted to, build a relationship one by one. You guys, I am so intentional about this stuff. It's like crazy. So I wanted to start slowly with weed, build a relationship with it, feel like we're on good terms and we have a good thing going. And then once that was established, I would feel comfortable enough to maybe consider getting into shrooms, which, being in the San Francisco Bay Area, a lot of people are also into shrooms, One time, one of my really close friends was talking about how they took shrooms by themselves, went to a park, listened to music, and just stared up at the clouds, and they were just crying because they were processing these emotions that they haven't processed in many, many months. And that they just knew deep in their soul they needed to connect with themselves in that way. And how beautiful that experience and that connection to themselves felt to them. And I remember thinking at the time, because I hadn't taken shrooms yet at that time, but I remember thinking, wow, that sounds very, very beautiful. I was still kind of like, what's that word when you're cautious? I'm thinking of a word that starts with an A, I think. But I was still a little bit like cautious of getting into anything else. I was honestly just happy with having weed in my life, but I don't know, something about the way they had that sort of experience really resonated with me at the time, because I felt very at peace with myself. I felt like I could honestly go the rest of my life without doing shrooms. But I think that's the very reason why I felt drawn to it, because I got this sense of like, you know what? I wouldn't mind deepening my relationship with myself even more. At the very least, expanding it. I think that's the better word. If I were to use shrooms in this way, it wouldn't necessarily deepen my relationship with myself, because I've already went through all the layers and got to the core of who I am and did all the shadow work, confronted the deepest, darkest parts of my soul and got right with it. If anything, the idea of shrooms felt resonant with me because there was an expansiveness to that experience. And so my friend was also, because they're ADHD, their hyper focus is shrooms. They were literally explaining the neuroscience behind shrooms and, how microdosing could really, really impact you in positive ways, because it could help you develop neuroplasticity, things like that. And I was just like, you know what? I trust my friend so much. I don't feel any fear towards this. Like, I may as well give it a try. And I remember I told my friend that they had very nicely made me microdosed shroom pills. For those of you who don't know, microdosing is such a small dose of shrooms that you don't even feel any sort of changes at all. Like it's almost like you're completely sober, but it still is impacting your neurology, which is why I felt safe enough to get into it, because I didn't want to trip or anything. Because growing up, everyone my age that were taking shrooms were taking it in the context of going to Coachella, going to all these festivals, and they would just go crazy tripping on all these drugs and stuff. And so I've always associated shrooms and other drugs to like, I don't know, numbing yourself or like completely letting go of control and just like, I don't know. It just didn't feel like it was for me. It seemed too intense. So the way that my friend explained how microdosing worked and the actual scientific effects on your neurology, I felt a lot safer with that concept. And so they made me these microdosing pills, and I brought it with me to my camping trip in Joshua Tree. And that's the very first time I microdosed was in Joshua Tree. I remember the very first time I felt the microdose hit. I was in the car driving down the road in Joshua Tree. The window was rolled down, and I remember just kind of sticking my head out the window, feeling the wind blow through my hair, looking out at the trees and at the sun, and it was so beautiful. And I remember just hearing what sounded like trumpets playing, like these very royal sounding trumpets. And I was like, oh my God, that is beautiful. Outside of that, the only other effects that I noticed when I was microdosing was just the simple integration of a third voice in my head. Before microdosing, I felt like the voices in my head was just myself and a very negative voice. And I'm sure a lot of you who have dealt with trauma knows what this is like. It's that voice that's literally always bullying you and always trying to protect you as well, but it just comes off as really anxious, like, oh my God, do you have everything you need? What if it gets cold? What if it rains? Make sure you bring an umbrella, make sure you bring a jacket. And then I'm like, oh, I don't think it'll be that bad. I'll be fine. And then the voice is like, oh, but what if you're out there and then you get really cold and then it ruins the whole experience? Oh, that person said hi to everyone except you. Do you think they're mad at you? What did you do wrong this time? Why are they ignoring you? Make sure you get on their good side, you know? So I felt like for so many years, I was trying to have a good relationship between myself and that voice. Being like, you know what, girl, you're good. Don't worry. That person doesn't hate you. Even if they're upset with you, they should come and talk about it with you. If not, not your problem. Or, girl, you don't need to bring a jacket. Holding it in your hand the whole time is not going to feel good. If you're that cold, then you'll deal with it then. You could borrow someone's jacket, or you could buy a jacket if it really is that bad, but it's really not a big deal. When I was first microdosing, it's almost like a third voice came in and was talking to that really negative voice that was usually in my head. It's almost like I could sit back and observe the way that these voices can talk to each other. So let's say the negative voice is like, oh my gosh, this camping trip was so stressful. Did we pack everything? Do you trust this person enough to have brought the things that they were supposed to bring, or do you think they forgot it? And then the third voice would come in and be like, you know what? We're here to have fun. We're here to connect with nature, ourselves, each other. If things are forgotten, we'll find a way to deal with it. But you know what? I trust this person enough to have done their job. And even if they didn't, it's okay, because we all make mistakes. You see what I'm saying? So I remember throughout the whole day, I was constantly hearing that third voice talking back to that very anxious and judgmental and unforgiving voice. And the third voice felt very compassionate, very understanding, very loving. I felt like that impacted me so much, because this is the thing with plant medicine. Whether it's weed, whether it's shrooms, what that does for you is it offers you a different way to think and experience. And you should bring that with you even outside of using the substances. Think of it as teachers, you know? Weed taught me how to feel physically relaxed. If it wasn't for weed, it would be a lot harder for me to know what it's like to physically exhale and feel relaxed and feel really in my body. Without microdosing on shrooms, I don't know if I would have ever developed that third compassionate, loving, understanding voice that wasn't judging this other voice that was very judgmental and critical and anxious. It was just like, calm down, we're gonna be good, you know? And so even after that day was over and the microdosing had faded, I felt like I brought that third voice with me everywhere I went. Whereas before, it was just me and that negative voice. And I feel like having those two sides of me felt a lot more balanced in a sense. And what I could do is keep encouraging and developing that voice that was more compassionate, that was more loving and understanding, and trusted the world around her and trusted herself is the other thing. Because it's like, oh my God, I didn't know this could exist. Let me keep paying attention to it. Let me keep feeding into it. Let me keep encouraging it because I like this part of me. After that microdosing experience, I would just on and off microdose here and there. Every single time I feel the need to connect deeper to myself on almost like a spiritual level, I go to shrooms. Because what I've noticed is that for me, weed really helps me get in my body and out of my head. So it helps ground me in a sense. Shrooms helps get me in tune with my sense of spirit. Spirit to me is like thinking about, what is my purpose here? What is the purpose of suffering? What is the purpose of humankind and love? Where am I supposed to go? How am I supposed to expand? These are thoughts that I have when I'm on shrooms. And so obviously I don't look to have those mind-blowing thoughts all the time and connect to myself like that all the time. But there are moments where I will be in like a transitional point in my life where I want to kind of catalyze and reflect on what I had just went through. And I want to have a more soulful reflection on all of that so that I could move forward in a more attuned way, if that makes sense. And I didn't start getting more into shrooms until this past year, because this past year was a really big reconnection to myself and reclamation of my energy back to myself. I have always lived with someone my whole life, right? Whether it's a roommate or a partner. This year was the very first time I moved out on my own, in my own place. It was like a lot of alone time, a lot of reflection time. And I utilized that time to basically just really get in tune with myself on like a spiritual soul level. And I probably used shrooms a lot more this past year than I ever did my whole life. It's never just like to go have fun. It's usually when I'm already feeling my soul tapping on the door and being like, girl, let's connect today. And usually it's like an off day where I don't have work and I just have all day to meander around, be kind of aimless. And so I'll take some shrooms and I'll go on a walk. I'll come back. I'll dance in my apartment by myself with music. I'll feel my body. I'll watch a movie and get really, really emotional and start crying because I have these crazy cathartic moments of realization. And it's like, if I could think of anything, weed to me is like the beauty of the earth and how grounding it is. And shrooms to me is like the galaxy. It's like something that extends outside of just simple human earthly things. But the beauty of shrooms is that it grounds you into the most simple things at the same time. It's honestly the craziest thing. It like expands you, but kind of brings you back down. The movie Soul is a really good movie to kind of get you to understand some of the lessons that people can tend to take away from when they're on shrooms, if that makes sense. It's just at the end of the day, after all these profound realizations, I am just a human and I'm just here for a certain amount of time. All I have to do is just experience life through my body, do what I can on a day-to-day basis, and that's it. That's it. It really is that simple. Shrooms help me be a lot more compassionate. I think when you're autistic, it's very easy to lose hope in other people and in the world and in society because we see things very holistically. Like we don't just see that one bad thing is happening. We tend to see all the bad things happening at once, and we see that the likeliness of that to change is really low. And I think when you see 10 steps ahead of a pattern, we're suffering now, our kids are going to suffer, our grandkids are going to suffer. Where are we going as a humankind? I think when you have that tendency to see a car crash before it happens, in a sense, you could feel so bogged down by that knowing. And I've seen this very often in other autistic folks, just like I could almost feel that energetic weight on them. Like their soul wants to be alleviated, but it's just so weighed down by how disappointing the world has been and will continue to be. And I was like that for so many years, just a very, very cynical person. And the only way I could deal with that cynicism is to just numb myself from it and not allow myself to feel empathy, to feel compassion, because it was too much. And so I've grown so disconnected from myself in order to try to cope on a day-to-day basis. But what's really helped me with plant medicine, but especially shrooms, is this reconnection back to my sense of compassion for humankind and this sense of hope. And it's not this delusional sense of hope, right? It's this very realistic sense of hope of like, these are all the shitty things happening in this world. These are all the ways we're all suffering, but at the same time, this is how we're all connected. These are all the little ways that humans are changing things in their own little corner of their world. And how fucking beautiful is that? That we're all just, fighting the fight in our own little ways for ourselves, for humans, for love, all this kind of stuff. And it's like, it doesn't negate that there's suffering, right? But you feel both parts of it very vividly. The suffering and all the powerful emotions that are born from suffering and overcoming suffering. Like the ways that suffering can bring people together in such a vulnerable, raw way. I don't know. It's just, I feel like shrooms helps get me in tune with the full scope of emotions and the full understanding of humankind in a way where it helps give me a sense of purpose, because all I could do is just do what I can do on a day-to-day basis to make a difference. I may not be able to fix everything, right? I'm sure a lot of us wish we could do that. But what I can do are these things. I can remind people to drink water at the end of my videos. I could really pay attention to my loved ones when they're opening up to me and talking to me, and I can make them feel heard that one time we're sitting in front of each other. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it gives you a realistic grasp of what can I do now? And how can I put my fullest, sincere, earnest effort into that in this moment to honor that moment, honor this person in front of me in that moment, honor myself in the moment I'm in, and just simply do that every time. That's all we can do. That's all there is to do. And it's beautiful. Yeah, I don't know. So I guess that's just a little bit of, my experience with plant medicine as an autistic person. I'm sure, again, a lot of us have different relationships with plant medicine. So partake in being in this community. Tell me in the comment section down below, what is your relationship like with plant medicine? How do you use it? How has it changed your life? And if you haven't partaken in plant medicine, maybe ask questions down below that some of us can answer, or just, engage down below. Make sure you guys take some time to tune in with yourselves today. Drink some water, eat some food, take yourself on a lovely walk. Enjoy the wind on your skin. Soak in the sun. Look at all the stimulating colors that nature has to offer. Take a moment to just extend gratitude towards the little things. And I will see you guys on the next one. Take care.